Hi everyone, good afternoon. So happy to be amongst all you esteemed pediatricians. My talk today is about a very relevant topic in today's day and age, which is how not to miss a cancer in a child. I'm going to focus mainly on hematological malignancies. As we know, globally, 1,000 children are diagnosed with cancer every day, and childhood cancer represents 1.4% of all new cancer cases. Now, the most common type of childhood cancers are mostly leukemias, lymphomas, brain tumors, and other solid tumors like neuroblastoma. Now, coming to the Indian scenario, where 1 million new cancers are diagnosed annually in India, and 3% of these occur in children, when these 50,000 new pediatric cancers constitute almost 20% of the world burden. Where you can see, as per the SEER data, as the treatment has advanced, even the survival has improved a lot. You can see in 2020, the survival rate has almost gone up to as high as 80 to 90%. Amongst the ranking of the individual cancers, the pediatric cancers still rank among the topmost six cancer amongst all the cancers in the world. Now, what are the type of pediatric cancers which can be missed or overlooked? So, hematological cancers, the most common type of cancers are usually leukemias and lymphomas, while the solid cancers include cancers like Wilms tumor, rhabdomyosarcoma, germ cell tumors, hepatoblastoma, etc. So, what are the reason of these diagnostic delays? What is the reason why some of them are missed? Cancer is actually very uncommon in childhood, and that is not one of the first differential diagnoses that a general pediatrician or any physician looking at a child with fever would think of. Because it is distinctly uncommon. Then the classical telltale symptoms can sometimes be very confusing and misleading. Then, of course, due to sometimes patients coming from periphery centers, due to poor diagnostic facilities, that is one of the main reasons why it can be missed. And the most important reasons, even if it is diagnosed and somebody says or tells the parents or the caregivers that the child has leukemia or any other kind of cancer, the reluctance to accept the denial is very high. So they sometimes unfortunately switch over to alternative modality of treatments like Ayurvedic treatments or other kind of treatments, and that can really lead to high complications and poorer outcomes. Now, this is the distribution of 12 common childhood cancers, where you can see leukemia is around 43%, followed by lymphoma, which is 14%, while the rest of the chunk is covered by the solid malignancies. Now, how are pediatric cancers different from adult cancers? Well, pediatric cancers are rare, as I mentioned. Hematological cancers are the most common kind of pediatric cancers, and if we catch them at the right time, as compared to adult cancers, the prognosis is really good. They are highly aggressive, but then they are highly curable, and the variable age-based incidence is present. Now, I'm going to quickly take you through few case scenarios. Case one is a case where this 3-year-old male came to us in OPD with a fever approximately lasting since past 20 days. The child was very listless, he was not playful, very irritable, and as per the mother, the appetite was really bad and poor. So, on general examination, the child visibly looked very irritable, as you can see. General examination, the child was pallor, was pale. There was no obvious lymphadenopathy on general examination. Yes, while trying to examine the child, there was mild sternal tenderness, but since the child was 1 year old, it was very difficult to differentiate whether it was sternal tenderness or child was just generally irritable. On systemic examination, per abdomen examination, there was a liver of 2 centimeters and a spleen which was just palpable. So, anybody wants to just share their thoughts on the differentials? What was the first differentials that one would think of? Well, the pediatrician was right when he thought about viral fever, enteric fever, and malaria. Then, after investigating, we found out that the CBC showed anemia, where HB was 7.6, there was leukocytosis, WBC was 38,000, and there was predominant lymphocytic predominance, which is lymphocytes were 88%. The platelet count was more or less normal, 1.5 lakh, and the peripheral smear showed lymphocytosis. Now, what prompted us to go ahead and do the bone marrow? Well, the patient was not responding to antipyretics. The patient received almost 10 days of antipyretics and antibiotics. The fever was still persistent. And when we spoke to the hematopathologist and found out, after having a detailed conversation about the CBC, the hematopathologist was very sure that they were not normal looking lymphocytes. There was lymphocytic predominance, and as per the age of the child, they were much more in number as compared to what the age of the child was. So, as pediatricians, of course, age and weight is the most important thing that we should keep in mind, and we all do. So that's why we went ahead and did a marrow. And this is what the bone marrow aspiration biopsy was suggestive of. It was suggestive of acute leukemia, and flow cytometry further was suggestive of B-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia. So what are the common symptoms and signs that one should keep in mind while you're thinking or even suspecting a case of leukemia? Well, fever. But fever could be, as we said, that our initial differentials were viral fever, enteric fever, and malaria. What is the very peculiar sign that one must always keep in mind while evaluating a case of suspected leukemia? Bony pains. So bony pains is something that is not commonly seen in patients of juvenile idiopathic arthritis or even viral fevers. Yes, patient can come with joint pains, but bony pain is something you have to particularly ask the parents that whether the child gets up in the night and does not go back to sleep because of the pain that is caused because of that. And of course, while inspecting such a child and in general examination, one must always look for sternal tenderness, which will help you in differentiating from other kind of viral and bacterial infections. And of course, other things like bleeding manifestations can be in any form, like gum bleeding, petechiae, purpura, ecchymosis. There can be a weight loss of 4 to 5 kgs in the last 5 to 6 weeks. Then other signs are pallor, that we already know, lymphadenopathy and hepatosplenomegaly. Well, sometimes they can also present with CNS manifestations and mediastinal mass. So if a child is coming to you with such similar symptoms but also associated with difficulty in breathing, dysphagia, increased respiratory rate, so all these things like mediastinal mass should also be kept in mind. If a child comes to you with CNS symptoms like deviation of angle of mouth or proptosis, then again one should think of it in totality and evaluate in terms of leukemia or lymphoma. So again, when should fever become worrisome? Prolonged fever, not getting completely correct by antipyretics and antibiotics, and in the absence of an infective basis, it should arouse suspicion of cases like rare infections, autoimmune disorders, and neoplastic process. So the famous 5 P's of leukemia would be pyrexia, pallor, bony pain, petechiae, and peripheral blood gas. What are the other non-malignant conditions that are commonly, even before leukemias, that obviously all us pediatricians will think of in such cases before we evaluated the child for leukemia? Infectious mononucleosis, juvenile idiopathic arthritis. But again, in juvenile idiopathic arthritis, when you see the CBC, there would be a neutrophilic predominance and not a lymphocytic predominance. So again, a discriminating feature between JIA and this disease and leukemia. Aplastic anemia would present with massive bleeding manifestations and pancytopenia. And ITP, of course, should be kept as a diagnosis of exclusion. And other malignant conditions like metastatic neuroblastoma, rhabdomyosarcoma, and retinoblastoma. So now coming to case 2, this was an 11-year-old girl with progressive swelling in neck since 4 months. Now the girl had 7 kg weight loss in the last 2 months. Drenching night sweats were present as per the mother. There was no abdominal distension, no cough, no history of Cox contact or similar illness in the family. On examination, there was bilateral cervical lymph nodes, no other lymph nodes elsewhere in the body, and there was no obvious hepatosplenomegaly or palpation. And this was the child with lymph node which was progressive in nature. It was growing in size despite antibiotics. An FNSC was done and it was inconclusive, and because the child did not respond to antibiotics for almost 7-8 days, the physician started the child on ATT, and despite treatment with ATT for 2 weeks, the patient did not show any signs of improvement. And the CBC was bang on normal. It was absolutely normal. Now, what would anybody want to say that what would anybody think of at this point of time? Yeah, definitely that could be. Uh, and patient was referred in hemat OPD and evaluated further. Well, while we were having a closer look at all the documents of the patients, we also came across consecutive KFT, especially last 2-3 kidney function tests was something like this. There was major renal dysfunction, the uric acid was very high, which was suggestive of hyperuricemia. There was hyperphosphatemia, and potassium was also high. So we went ahead and also ordered other tests like LDH just to see whether we are dealing with something called as tumor lysis or not. Now, further evaluation revealed that an LDH of 1950, which was really high, KFT again repeated was deranged. So, another important and very, very crucial clue is tumor lysis and raised LDH, especially when you're thinking in terms of leukemia or lymphoma or trying to differentiate it from other etiologies. So, what are we thinking at this point of time? Infection? No, obviously not. As Sir correctly pointed, we're thinking to rule out malignancy. So a non-contrast whole body PET CT scan was done. That's because the child had renal dysfunction. We did not go ahead with a contrast PET CT scan, and these were the findings of the PET CT scan. Further, an excisional biopsy of the lymph node was suggestive of lymphoma, and further characterization of by IHC confirmed the diagnosis of Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now, the two most important learnings from the case 1 and case 2 would be that if you're really suspecting malignancy and it is very high at the suspicion index, please don't start the patient on steroids. If even you have a slightest doubt, then of course consulting amongst each other would be a better thing to do, because once you start steroids, and of course if it is a leukemia, patient will definitely show improvement, but once those steroids are stopped and again the patient comes up with similar features, then it would not be just a leukemia, it would be a relapsed case of that leukemia. So one must definitely consider that point. Now, just a simple fact about lymphadenopathy. We all know that examination of lymph nodes is an integral part of general physical examination, and not just the lymph nodes. Because we are suspecting leukemia, we should also examine other satellite sites, which are the testicular sites. So testicular mass is another common presentation of leukemia that one must look at. CNS manifestations we've already spoken about. Now, the challenge basically lies whether these are pathological or non-pathological nodes. So, when will we consider it as significant size? When the cervical nodes are more than 10 mm in diameter, the axillary nodes are more than 10 mm in diameter, and inguinal more than 15 mm in diameter. Or an unusual site of presentation like a swelling in the mediastinal swelling or a supraclavicular lymph node. And of course, not responding to antibiotics and ATT. Now, this is the last case where this 9-year-old girl from Ranchi presented to OPD with persistent cough, hoarseness of voice since 20 days, difficulty in swallowing, and gradually increasing dyspnea since past 15 days. There was history of high-grade fever for the past 7 days. Her Tmax was 103. So she was started on alternative modality of treatment, and patient did not show any signs of improvement. Rather, her signs and symptoms worsened. Now, there was no history of significant weight loss, no joint pain, no loss of appetite or drenching night sweats. On examination, there was mild pallor, no lymphadenopathy. Yes, there was an upper body edema and jugular vein distension. When we examined and auscultated her, there was absent air entry in the left upper zone. On per abdomen examination, liver was 3 centimeters palpable below the right costal margin. So our main differentials were lymphoma, germ cell tumor, and thymoma. The child continued to take Ayurvedic treatment for almost 3.5 months, and she deteriorated quite a lot, and she came to us in very bad condition and was admitted in ICU. Anyhow, the CBC and peripheral smear showed an HB, which was indicative of anemia, and MCV 69. TLC was 12,400 with neutrophilic predominance and no atypical cells. Again, the catch point in this case was the KFT showed a uric acid of 13. There was severe hyperuricemia, and LDH, you can see it was way elevated, almost 2830. And this was how the chest x-ray looked like. It was a huge anterior mediastinal mass, which was probably causing all that the child presented with. When we went ahead with the CT scan, there was a large solid anterior mediastinal mass with tracheal compression and pleural effusion. So a true-cut biopsy of the mass was suggestive of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So the clue to diagnosis, obviously the presence of anterior mediastinal mass with compressive symptoms, we had to go ahead with a biopsy and find out what are we dealing with. There was a short history with such rapidly progressive symptoms and biochemical evidence of raised TLS and raised LDH. So a true-cut biopsy, as I said, was suggestive of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now, these are the common presentations. I'm going to quickly just talk about it. Anytime you see any child presenting with recurrent fever, not responding to antibiotics, antipyretics for a prolonged time, with severe bony pain, also on general examination, if you find there are significant lymph nodes with hepatosplenomegaly and sternal tenderness, one must always keep a very high index in suspicion of leukemia. Again, looking at biochemical parameters along with CBC and peripheral smear also becomes very important. As you can see in the last two scenarios, we could see that kidney function test and LDH gave us very important clues. And otherwise, of course, keeping in mind these symptoms like weight loss, drenching night sweats, we can, of course, confuse all those symptoms with tuberculosis. But once the patient has not improved after a trial of 2 weeks of ATT or even 2 weeks of antibiotics, one must definitely consider a very high suspicion of leukemia and lymphoma. So my take home message here would definitely be, see, cancer in children is a clinically heterogeneous disease. The signs and symptoms mimic common pediatric conditions. That's where all the problem lies. And early recognition and rapid diagnosis are essential to improve the survival. The pediatricians, of course, as pediatricians, I believe, are very intelligent breed. So most of them are not missed, but the ones who are missed haven't. That's why pediatricians have a very important role to play, and a high index of suspicion should be kept in such cases. Most childhood leukemias and lymphomas have high cure rates. So again, if we catch them early, there's nothing like it. Especially pediatric leukemias, their prognosis is really good, almost 80 to 90% survival. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
And highlighted many issues. Just wanted to highlight one or two more scenarios. So all of you will be seeing patients of ITP. So again, whenever you see a patient of ITP, there are classical ITP patients, the age, the presentation, the CBC, if everything is normal,